Good afternoon. I see we only have one student on, but we were only allocated half an hour, so I'm going to start, if that's okay. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, but welcome, Ronnie.
Yes, that's correct.
Did I get it
I
right
think
first time?
it's important to point out,
Yes.
Mario, at the Vinci, for us, the journey of a student is a unique experience. And so, regardless of how many students and team members we have in a session, we treat all our sessions the same because it's a critical part of the Da Vinci journey that every student is an individual. So we hope, Ronnie, to engage with you, those of us that have joined, because we are also interested in Dr. Landman's topic, and that we'll be able to engage with you as part of our family at Da Vinci.
Yes, thank you for that. It's a bit overwhelming knowing I'm the only student here and everybody else is doctors and professors. But I would appreciate if the session can go on as well.
Ronnie, which qualification are you pursuing at the Vinci Institute?
I'm doing the BCom.
The BCom, okay, right. Well, hopefully some of your classmates or potential classmates will join. It sounds
Yes.
like you're driving, which is going to make it
Yes.
a little awkward because we had an activity planned. Uh,
No, it's okay. So I'm just in the passenger seat. So I'm not driving myself. So for the next half an hour, I will be able to look at the screen and
okay,
cooperate.
let's
Yeah.
see if we can make it work.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining. This is the second in a series of these little micro engagements that we've planned for new students while they're waiting to start their formal programs. And the idea behind this is to sort of equip you with some fundamental skills that will help you in your tertiary studies, so that you're a little ahead of the game and you can hit the ground running right as you start your program. So. Uh, our first session for the year was about how to fit your studies into your life, uh, additional commitments, etc. And those slides are available should you want to look at them and if you missed that particular session. Okay, so today's session is about building your vocabulary. Later on in the sessions, as we progress, we're going to deal with more topics relating to academic literacy and writing skills and arguing skills and persuading skills and all of those things that you need to be a good academic writer. But it starts with building a strong foundation of a wide vocabulary. So we will be dealing with two sort of aspects of this. First, I would like to just spend about 10 minutes looking at why we have to actively pursue a wide vocabulary, why we should be building on a vocabulary actively and purposefully on a daily basis. And then as a second component, what are some of the strategies that we can follow to build our vocabulary? And then I've got an activity planned that we call the prefix challenge right at the end of it. And hopefully our students, should they join us, would be able to participate in that as well. Okay, so starting off, why build my vocabulary? Now, in academic writing, it is essential to communicate very concisely and very accurately. In other words, you need to say what you mean. Now, why that's important is that in academic writing, article writing, scientific writing, other people must be able to pick up what you've written and they have to interpret what you've written accurately. In other words, your intent has to come through very accurately. And that is very important, especially when others are trying to verify your research or they're trying to duplicate your research. It is critically important that they understand exactly what you've put down on the page. Very often we associate academic writing with a sort of the use of convoluted, high, very fanciful words, and that is not the case. Often it sounds that way because the English language allows us to select very specific words to communicate very specific intent or very specific meaning. It's very much like walking in a garden. And you're trying to construct a sentence like, I drive to work in a car. Now, each word is represented by a flower bed. Now, in that flower bed, there are many different words that has a similar meaning, but they cater for different registers and tone and different context. So where I drive my car to work is absolutely fine, and most people would understand exactly what you mean by that. The word car, for instance, could be interpreted in many ways. It could have an association with trains, for instance. If your intent is to communicate that I commute to work with a automated mechanical vehicle, then maybe the word automobile is more appropriate. So it's about being very conscious of what you're trying to communicate and then putting that down on paper or when you speak. The challenge with that is that if you don't have a lot of flowers in those flower beds, your selection will be very limited and you might not be able to communicate exactly what you intended to. The second point there is that, similar to the first point where you are trying to outwardly communicate what you intend, what's in your head, the thoughts that you formulated, you also have to have an understanding, a broad understanding of words to be able to pick up what others have put down. In other words, you have to be able to listen and read with understanding. So if you've got a limited vocabulary, specifically in an academic context where there's a lot of jargon and there's a lot of maybe scientific terms or terms that are associated with specific disciplines or very specific terms, like, for example, the automobile versus the car that we've used. There's such a wide vocabulary for us to choose from to communicate our intent. If you're not familiar with those words and you haven't internalized those words and can use those words, they would be completely lost on you. So there's a two-way break in communication. Firstly, if you don't have the words to express yourself accurately, others won't understand what the intent of your message is, and vice versa. You wouldn't be able to pick up, in other words, understand or internalize what others communicate if you don't have a broad vocabulary to draw from. The third point there is that we are not always just communicating in one specific context. There is a variety of contexts as students and as professionals that we are required to communicate in, whether it's socially within a work group, whether it's in a formal assignment or a research paper that we're presenting. There's a different set of vocabulary, different flowers in that flower bed that we have to be able to draw on for different contexts. Different contexts require different stylistic aspects to our communication, different tone, different register. And if you don't have a large vocabulary, again, you will have very limited choices and you might not be able to communicate stylistically in a way that is appropriate for a particular context. So very, very critical to build your vocabulary to ensure that in different contexts, people understand what you are trying to communicate. Right. Now, there's a chicken and the egg argument, and some people say that, and it's a long-standing dispute, and I'm not sure if it'll ever be resolved, but some people say that our language shapes our ideas, and other people say that our ideas shape our language. Now, whichever side of the fence you are on, it is critical for you to have a suitably large vocabulary or a range in words or expressions that you can use to formulate ideas. So it all ties together with the previous point. If you don't have the words, you can't formulate ideas concisely or articulate them well. So having a large vocabulary is very, very crucial if you are trying to put together ideas in a way that is concise, that articulates exactly what you intended it to articulate, and others can pick up and share in the meaning that you are trying to put down. So formulating ideas, formulating concepts, later on in your studies, coming to hypotheses, coming to research questions, etc. It's critical to have a suitable toolbox from which to draw to make sure that you can accurately formulate those ideas. Academic writing is essentially about arguing. Now, Ronnie, if you are able to answer what makes a good argument. So if you're arguing with a spouse or with a partner, Who wins the argument and why?
Wow. Okay. For starter, I'm not so good at arguing at all. I lose every argument normally I get in. To win the argument, I think you need to be able to express and explain your opinion clearly, with very obviously firm expression, and also very under words that can be able to be understood by your opponent. I don't know if that's that word for opponent.
Yes, absolutely. So when we delve into this deeper later on in the series, and in the BCom, you'll have a specific subject called academic literacy, where the skills involved in argumentative writing will be unpacked for you. But effectively, you are trying to convince an audience of your particular view and trying to substantiate that view as being the authoritative view, the correct view, being a view that is valid, a view that should be taken seriously. Now, to be able to do that, you have to be able to formulate clear statements. So the first thing is your stance, your position in the argument needs to be clearly articulated. And there, again, as per the formulating ideas and the rest of the points on this page, you need the right vocabulary to concisely and accurately explain what or position your stance, provide your opinion. Then following that, an argument is won based on the evidence, the supporting, your statement has to be supported by a strong argument. So it's the fact, the figures, the research that you've done, the reasons for your particular stance, and all of those things have to be very accurately articulated. So the fundamentals of good academic writing, apart from being able to structure an argument logically, and we're going to delve deeply into that later, you have to have the right vocabulary, the words to express what your stance is. Now, the other night I was witnessing more than watching, an argument between our two kids. The one is 12, the other is 6. So obviously very different grasps on the English language and very different sets of vocabulary. And the older one is trying to very clearly articulate what his stance was on a particular issue that they were arguing about. And the other one just said, well, it is what it is because I say so. Didn't have the words. And that is a good example for me, what we resort to if we don't have these tools to draw from. The better your vocabulary, the better you can respond, the clearer you can articulate what your stance is, and the better you can support what that stance is. Okay. All right. So how do I build my vocabulary? Now, the first and most obvious strategy is to read widely. We've put there in brackets contextual variety. So you have to, even if you've got a very good grasp of the English language and you've got a large vocabulary to draw from, you have to understand which sets of vocabulary, which parts of those flower beds are meant for which contexts and which applications. So without doing that, you are misaligning maybe the register and tone of your writing or your speech to what is expected within a particular context. And that breaks the communication as well. So the only way to really build this skill is to read very widely. Read academically, but also read popular articles, newspaper articles. Build your vocabulary by reading as widely as possible and as diversely as possible when it comes to different kinds of media. So that is absolutely critical. And as you do that, you'll start finding that certain words that communicate certain concepts are supplemented by other words that have a similar meaning, but in other contexts. For instance, the car automobile example that we gave, there are certain instances where car is absolutely fine and people will know what you're talking about. But like I said, the word car has different meanings in different contexts, so it could be taken out of context. So it's always it's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know what the conventions are of a particular a type of media, a particular writing context or speaking context, whatever the communication context is that you are working in, then you will misalign your what you prepared or the way that you express yourself with what the conventions of that context is. So you learn the conventions of those contexts by reading as widely as possible. Okay, listening for understanding. So like I said at the very beginning, building your vocabulary is an active exercise. It is not something that sort of happens haphazardly. Well, if it does, it's not going to happen at the pace that you want it to happen, and you're not going to develop at the pace that you want to develop. So a lot of people listen simply for their opportunity to reply or to express their opinion, but not really listening to what is being said. So one of the critical skills to build your vocabulary is to listen actively to the way that others express themselves and see how people respond to that. Understanding that you might be at a party, for instance, for lack of a better explanation, a better example, and someone expresses themselves in a particular way, and the person that they're speaking to doesn't understand because the register or tone is misaligned to the context in which the conversation or the communication happens. So it's a good practice to listen actively, really listen at the way that people pronounce words, the words they select in specific contexts, how they use those words, and whether they are effectively communicating by their use. So this is the way that everybody learns a particular language. If a child wants to ask for something, the way that they learn that particular skill, the words associated with that ask, is by seeing other people asking it and seeing what the response is. So it's a very subtle skill to develop, but it's also a very valuable skill if you could listen actively and really try to analyze the way that people speak. Right. Taking note of new words is not really the full activity. The point of taking notes is to internalize words. So we read gazillions of words every day, but you sort of get the gist of it, and a lot of meaning is deduced from contextual cues and not really analyzing what words mean. So a good skill for a student is when they come across a word they are not familiar with, to note that word down, find out exactly what it means, find out how it fits contextually in different contexts or different applications, and then to try and use those words. So it's not just about taking note of new words, but really trying to internalize those words. So if you know the word, but you can't use the word in the right context or in the right application, it's not really in your toolbox. It is not really in your flower bed. So you can't really pick that word when you are speaking or communicating. So not just taking note of words, but really going the whole way, looking them up in a dictionary, look at when it is used in specific writing or in other contexts, take note of how it is used so that you can internalize the meaning and the use of that word so it becomes part of your writing arsenal. Use your tools. Now, the most basic tool for a writer is, of course, a dictionary. Nowadays, we have so many tools available to us. A tool that I find very, very helpful is something like Grammarly, or recently launched the Microsoft Editor that is part of a Microsoft package. And all that really does is it creates an awareness of your word selection. There are stylistic settings, so it will tell you whether a word is appropriate for a business communication setting, or for an academic setting, or for a social setting. And those are very good guides to try and build your sensitivity around word usage. So looking up what words mean in a good old dictionary and using these technologies that are now available to help guide your palette for lack of a better term, in regard to the usage of particular words. All right. Ronnie, do you use any of these tools? Have you heard of Grammarly?
Mario, no, I have not heard any of those two tools you have just mentioned. I actually would like to ask, how can I get started to learn to use them?
Well, I'll leave a link in the chat box for Grammarly. So it's got a free online application, but there's also a paid for version if you write a lot, that plugs into the Office package. Microsoft Editor comes as part of the Office package now. And as a Da Vinci student, you will be supplied with a whole suite. So that functionality will be built in there. But so it's a new product.
Okay, so the program will be available there for us to use. In terms of, so is it very easy to just get my hands on and I will be able to figure it out?
Yes. Once you are onboarded to your program, all of this will be made available to you. So you will be registered as a user of Office 365 for Edu. You'll be getting the whole package, and this is a plugin that sits within Microsoft Word. So yes. It's a spell checker on steroids. So not just a spell checker, a grammar checker, but a stylistic checker, which is becoming very popular, and in some ways have sort of almost eclipsed Grammarly, which is a premium tool. Okay, so making use of your tools. All right, the last one there is to practice new words and note responses. So if you are actively building your vocabulary on a daily, on a weekly basis, you would want to test drive these new words you learn. Once you use them, because remember we said you have to use them for them to become part of your toolbox, part of your arsenal, a flower in your flower bed to pick as you construct your sentences. So you have to practice using them and then see what the response is. You very quickly pick up if someone is attempting to communicate too formally, or if they're using words that is not suitable for the setting or the context. So see how people respond to that. Remember, the ultimate aim, going right back to the beginning of our presentation, is to communicate as clearly as possible. So when you formulate an idea and you put it down, you want your lecturer, your assessor, your colleagues, examiners of papers, you want them to have a shared meaning of what you were trying to communicate. So that is a very good tool. But again, all of these are active strategies. They're not things that happen passively. You have to note the new word, write it down, look it up, use it, and then see if you are using it correctly before it becomes part of your arsenal. Now, Ronnie, what I did was I wanted to make this a little bit more interactive. So a activity that we often do with language students is called the Prefix Challenge. So I'll maybe just talk you through it. I see we've got limited time available. We won't be able to do the challenge if you don't have a pen and paper handy, because there's 13 words or 13 prefixes that we want you to try and use. Yes.
Sorry, I actually do have pen and paper.
Okay. Let's see how far. Maybe
if
we only
is needed.
Yeah, so let's do 5 and see how that goes. Okay, so a prefix is a word, letter, or number that is placed before.
I'm doing it as well, Mario.
Sorry?
I'm doing it as well because
Are you also doing it? Okay, let's get right into it. Awesome. Okay, so why prefixes are important is if you understand prefixes and you know your prefixes, you can multiply your root vocabulary by 10. Because prefixes are used to manipulate or change the meaning of a root word. Now, examples that I gave there is, for instance, size, microeconomics versus macroeconomics, quantity, monotheism, theism, God worship, mono, one God, uni, bi, or tricycle, one wheel, 2 wheels, or 3 wheels. So a prefix manipulates, change, or amends the meaning of a root word. Okay, right, so the challenge is there's 13 prefixes that I've put down. where there are multiple prefixes in a column, they have the same meaning, so you can use any one of them. So let's try and use the first 5. So that's a or an, add, a, ac or as, anti, and the other anti. They are both pronounced the same, but they've got very different meanings. So just try and use them in a example. And then we'll quickly discuss what their meaning is. In other words, how do they manipulate or change what the root word means? Right, Ronnie and Marla, would you like to give it a go? Let's see if you can make up words with the first 5.
Ish.
Can I please ask for maybe Marla, if you can do the first, so I can know, I can see how it's done.
Well, Mario, I can't say that I'm doing very well at this because I'm not entirely sure. So should we make a sentence like anti, like would I say antithesis or anti-vax or
Yes.
so create?
Yes, so create the word using these prefixes. So automation, for instance, circumvention.
Yes, or circumstances, or counterpart, counter-reaction.
Exactly. So if you don't immediately have something for the first 5, maybe look at the others. There might be some easier ones. By, for instance, is easy. Anti is easy. Auto is easy. Just try and jot some attempts down.
So you have a meaning column after each prefix. So do you mean those prefixes have different meanings?
They all have different meanings, yes. But we'll get to the meaning afterwards. So just make an attempt. We don't have a lot of time, so just jot it down for yourself, and then we'll quickly run through what the meanings and some examples that I've provided. And the wonderful thing about prefixes, like I said, there are not hundreds of prefixes. And if you learn the basics, you are immediately adding to your vocabulary without having to learn new words, because prefixes, like I said, are used to manipulate. Okay, right, we've got 2 minutes left. Let's quickly run through them. Right, so some examples of anesthetic or
I was going to say I did for dis. I did the one for dis and for by and for sir.
Okay, what have you got for dis?
So I said disengage, dismember, dishearten, distract.
Perfect.
Biannual, bilateral, biology, biography, circumstance, circumvent, circumscribe.
Communication students, Marla. Awesome.
It wasn't so easy, Mario.
You've got an awesome vocabulary. Ronnie, do you want to try some? Have you got one or two?
So, yeah, I only had few. So the first A-N, I think. I got anecdote.
Yes.
I got AB for, okay, I didn't make more than one for each. It's AB absolute.
Yes.
AD, I got adjective.
Yes.
Adjacent.
Right. Yes, good.
I didn't go to another one yet. ANTE, I couldn't think of anything on top of my head. And antibody.
Yes.
And I got the autoimmune.
Good one.
By, I was thinking, I thought of by.
Okay, all right.
Biology.
Yeah, biology.
But I don't think, I'm not sure if that's using the prefix though.
Yes, it is. It is. Okay, so let's quickly get to and these are, listen, these are some prefixes. There are many more, but these are ones that we use very often. So a or an means without or not. So theist, for instance, means God. So atheist means no God. I do not believe in God. I'm an atheist. Right? If we look at ab, which means away or from, abject or abscess. This one is to and toward, access, admit, assist. You've got antibiotics, which means against. Antibiotics, bio meaning life, anti meaning against life. So an antibiotic killed life. That's what it actually means. An antioxidant, so an oxidant provides oxygen. So antioxidant kills oxygen. It's bifocals. Focal meaning sight. Bifocal, two sights, two or both. Circumference. Circum means round, so circumference means the outside of a circle. When you circumscribe something, you literally or you figuratively draw a circle around the meaning to limit what the meaning of something is. You circumscribe it to say what it is and what it isn't. Companion, concurrent, counter, and contra. Counteract, to act in a certain way. When you counteract it, you are acting in the opposite way. So what I'm just trying to illustrate with this little activity, and we've run completely out of time, sorry for that, is that if you have a limited vocabulary, a very good strategy is to spend a bit of time to learn the meaning of prefixes and suffixes so that you can manipulate your root words and add vast amounts of words to your base vocabulary. Ronnie, I hope that was helpful, and I hope we'll see you at the next session.
Yes, it was very interesting as well. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the other participants and colleagues on the line. Hopefully we'll see you at the next session. Thank you very much for joining.